Good morning. Late last night, Minister Stuart Ayres informed me that he would resign from his ministerial positions and as Deputy Leader of the New South Wales Parliamentary Liberal Party. His intention to resign follows a briefing I received from the Department of Premier and Cabinet Secretary Michael Coates-Trotter yesterday afternoon on a section of the draft Graham Head report relevant to Mr Ayres. I subsequently discussed the issues raised in that briefing with Mr Ayres. Mr Head's draft findings raised a concern as to whether Mr Ayres had complied with the Ministerial Code of Conduct. The issues raised fell outside the terms of reference of the Head review. Mr Head's review does not and could not extend to whether Mr Ayres had complied with the Ministerial Code of Conduct. When I put these matters to Mr Ayres, he offered his resignation from the ministry and as Deputy Leader of the Parliamentary Liberal Party. An investigation will now be undertaken to determine if Mr Ayres has breached the Ministerial Code of Conduct. I've asked Mr Coates-Trotter to ensure this is carried out in an appropriate manner. Public confidence in ministers discharging their responsibilities is paramount and fundamental to our political system. The portfolio responsibilities of Minister for Enterprise, Investment and Trade, Minister for Tourism and Sport, and Minister for Western Sydney will be reassigned, and I'll make that announcement in due course. The election of a new Deputy Leader of the Parliamentary Liberal Party will be conducted at the next party room.
Premier, why did you stand by Stuart Ayres for so long when you knew there were concerns that were going to be raised by the Graham Head inquiry, and you knew that the Graham Head inquiry couldn't even look into questions of the Ministerial Code of Conduct?
Well, very simply, I base my decision-making on the information that I receive. In relation to matters of previous performance and behaviour of members of the Liberal Party or members of the ministry, once information comes to light, I act on that. Now, I've always said, in relation to this matter, when information in respect of this review came through, that I would act on that information accordingly. And that's exactly what I've done. Yesterday, I received information as a draft section of the Head review that specifically related to Mr Ayres, and based on the information information that came to light in that review, I made that decision.
Premier, isn't a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct an ICAC matter? Like, should this not be being investigated beyond just your public service?
No, the advice I've received is that investigation can be provided and look into the matters. The draft review that I have seen in relating to those matters with respect to Mr Ayres raises questions. It raises questions in respect to the Ministerial Code of Conduct. I am the custodian, as Premier, of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. So once that investigation is complete, then I will take any action that is required.
So what has Mr Ayres, or what questions are around, what has Mr Ayres done, or what questions do you have?
So the issues in the review go directly to the engagement of Minister Ayres with the Department Secretary in respect of the recruitment process. So that raises questions in relation to the Ministerial Code of Conduct. As a result, Minister Ayres has resigned from his positions, and DPC, the Department of Premier and Cabinet, will conduct an investigation in relation to those.
So it's exactly what we've been asking him about for the last 5 days, and he's been telling us he wasn't involved. So he's also lied.
And misled?
Maybe
the Parliament?
What is important is, rather than speculate, what is important is the information that comes to light is acted on. And that is exactly what I have done, and is exactly how Minister Ayres has responded to information that has come through that draft review.
But it wasn't new information to him. It wasn't new information to him. He knew what he'd done.
The information that has come through the draft review, as I have said from the outset, in relation to this matter, I conducted a review almost immediately when questions came to light in respect of this process. I have said in every public statement during the course of this period of time that once I receive the information from this review, I will act accordingly. Now, I have not, make this clear, I've not received the entire review. I only received an element of the draft review that was brought to my attention yesterday that relates specifically to the conduct of Mr Ayres in respect of his engagement with the Department Secretary in relation to the recruitment process.
Mr Ayres did not need review.
Did Mr Ayres lie to you? If you've had conversations with him, you're away on a trip, has he lied to you when you've asked him things?
I do not believe so. No, I have no evidence of that at all.
So
What I have.
You were comfortable with him, and now you're going.
You supported him.
You said that he was a very good minister, and now you're second.
Well, I'll say two.
Nothing wrong.
I'll say two things in relation to that. I've said from the outset, in relation to these matters, that I would conduct an inquiry, an independent inquiry, and that's exactly what I have done. And I've always said, every step of the way through this process, that I will not do what's politically expedient. I will do what I believe is proper and right. They are the guiding principles in relation to my ethical framework in respect of due process and obtaining information, not in a political way, but in an independent and fair way. That is exactly what I have done in relation to this review. It's exactly what I have done in relation to this review. What I will not do is move to and make decisions based on media pressure or political pressure. I'll make decisions, as I've always done, in relation to what I believe is right. I've conducted this independent review. Information from that review has come to light that raises questions in respect of compliance with the Ministerial Code of Conduct.
If you're not, Premier, if you're not bowing to pressure, then why didn't you wait for the final review? Why did you request a draft?
Because yesterday afternoon, I received information from the Department of the Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet. I read a draft excerpt of that review that pertains to Mr Ayres. Once receiving that information, I'm on notice in respect of questions that are raised in respect of the engagement between Mr Ayres, the Department Secretary, and the recruitment process. With that information provided to me yesterday afternoon in a briefing with the Department Secretary, I met with Mr Ayres and he tendered his resignation appropriately.
Are you worried then about what is going to come out this morning from Amy Brown and her evidence? Are we likely to see some more clarity around what Stuart Ayres' involvement is?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's obviously a upper house inquiry they receive information which they've had through various documents, and people are providing evidence to that inquiry. That I have said from the outset, the upper house inquiry will do its work. My job was to implement an independent review. That's exactly what I have done. And I have said every step of the way, that I will take action based on the information that I have received. Now, I understand there is substantial public interest in this. I understand that there is substantial media interest in this. But I'm always, in this job, going to make decisions based on appropriate information that I receive. That's exactly what I've done here. That's what I've said every step of the way. Whilst I've not received, to the questions from Amelia and James, whilst I've not received the full report, I have seen an excerpt of the draft report that pertains to Mr Ayres and made the appropriate decision.
Just in terms of the evidence that you have received, is it the evidence that we've all seen in relation to the emails, the briefing notes and those exchanges which have been made public for some days now, or is it something new?
I'm not going to give a running commentary when the final report is released.
Because the evidence has been before the public for days now. The questions have been before you and the Minister for days now, but only now, when Graham Head says it's an issue, have you acted?
No, I've said every step of the way through this process that I would get the information in relation to the independent review. The independent review, the draft review in matters relating to Minister Ayres that I have seen in respect of his view based on the interviews that he has undertaken in respect of this process, and he has met with the Secretary of the Department, on numerous occasions. He's met with Mr. Ayres as part of this, and has made various findings in relation to that engagement that I have read. And on seeing his views in relation to this matter yesterday afternoon, the appropriate action has been taken. Ashley.
Premier, how do you think it is acceptable that you've now sacked, or 2 ministers have been lost this week, and you think it's acceptable to not provide any transparency around exactly what they did, that they can no longer sit around the cabinet table?
Well, I'll deal with those 2 issues separately. In relation to Ms. Perrottet, I, on return, spoke with the Department Secretary of Customer Service and issues that were raised with me relating to workplace behaviour, made me form the view and the judgment that Ms. Perrottet should no longer be a minister. That information is provided to me. Now, in respect of that process, that information is important because it goes to structures that I have implemented in relation to complaints handling, and they are very important that they are followed. People.
Okay, so what about Mr. Ayres?
I'll finish.
We heard all this on Monday. So just
well, you asked the question.
Well, no, but I'm asking why is it acceptable that you are giving no reasons for why these?
I have.
I've been done.
No. I'll go back. I'll go back to the first part in relation to Ms. Perrottet. In respect of that information, privacy is paramount in respect of complaints handling. So my judgment in relation to a safe workplace was formed my decision in respect of that matter. In relation to the second matter, based on the information I received yesterday, there are questions in relation to whether or not there have been breaches of the Ministerial Code of Conduct by Mr. Ayres that relate to the engagement between the Minister and the Department Secretary in respect of the recruitment process. On receiving that information, I've made this decision to act. In relation to the entire review, once that review is finalised, I will make it public, as I always have said I will.
Which section of the Ministerial Code of Conduct do you believe Mr. Ayres has questions to answer over?
It relates to Mr. Ayres' engagement with his Department Secretary and influence in relation...
Which section of the Ministerial Code?
The advice I've received is in relation to engagement with the Department Secretary in respect of influence on the decision-making process.
So he did influence the decision-making process?
No, that's not... No.
Could have.
It's certainly to me, and to Mr. Ayres, raises questions in relation to potential breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. And on receiving that report, that element of the report, and on receiving a briefing yesterday in respect of that matter, there was no... This was the appropriate action.
Clinton. There are people watching this at home who don't follow politics the way we do. They don't understand what the Ministerial Code of Conduct is. Can we just simplify it? From your understanding of the draft report, did Minister Ayres play a significant role in the appointment of John Barilaro? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, there is, from what I have received in that draft report, there is no doubt that there are questions in relation to questions raised, not findings. Not findings in relation to the information I've received. Questions are raised in relation to whether or not there have been a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Now, in those circumstances, and on receipt of that information, Minister Ayres tendered his resignation, and appropriately, I've called for a review in relation to whether there has been a breach.
Max. Personally, given the damage this has done to your government, is it frustrating that Mr. Ayres hasn't come forward before and, at least admitted to some of the wrongdoing and let this saga drag on for weeks now?
Well, people have the right to have proper processes take place, and I think that is only fair. I think that is only fair and reasonable. And as I have said, there are always political challenges in public life. I have to make decisions in relation to the approach that I and the government takes when information comes to light. I instigated an independent review. That was a decision I made, and I've said every time that I would wait till I receive that information. I accept that there has been significant media interest in relation to this matter, but I'm not going to bend to media pressure or political pressure. I will make the right decisions that I believe are in the best interest of the state of New South Wales, based on appropriate information that I've received.
Premier, the reality is, despite telling us multiple times, Stuart Ayres was not at arm's length from this process, was he?
It's very clear, and Mr Ayres has views in relation to that. He has view, and on the discussions I had with Mr Ayres last night, in respect of how he saw his role in the process, and Mr Ayres denies. I make this very clear. Mr Ayres denies any wrongdoing at all. He denies any wrongdoing. But the questions that have arisen that come through the report make it very clear, in my view, and in Mr Ayres' view, that there's a potential breach of the ministerial code of conduct, and in those circumstances, this is the appropriate course of action to take. Now, I just want to make that point because it is very relevant, and that is that he denies any wrongdoing. I understand the point in respect of arm's length as part of the process. He has a different view in relation to his engagement with the process, and the review that will be conducted by DPC will make findings in respect.
Premier, do you think your government will ever now be able to shape the perception of jobs for the boys? I mean, you've lost your minister over it. How will you ever convince the public otherwise?
Well, from my perspective as Premier, I'm elected to do and have great responsibility in making sure that decisions are made appropriately and in the best interest of the people of our state. And that's what our government has done the entire time it's been in office. We continue to work tirelessly each and every day for the great people of New South Wales. That's what I do, that's what my ministers do. And when issues arise, they need to be dealt with appropriately, and that's exactly what I've done.
Premier, is it your expectation that Stuart Ayres will stay on as a Member of Parliament?
What was that?
Is it your expectation that Stuart Ayres will stay on as a Member of
Yes.
Parliament?
Did he give you that assurance? Did he give you that assurance that he will stay on and not cause a by-election?
When I spoke to him last night, he told me that his intention was to remain as the member for Penrith.
Premier, given your concerns relate to the engagement with the Minister and the head of the department and the agency,
yes.
Do you know how concerns about Andrew as well in this?
Well, I have not. I've only seen, as I said, a section of the report, a section of the draft report that relates to Mr Ayres. I have not seen the entire review. I've only seen that draft review. It will be released shortly. Proper processes should be followed. And as I have said, any recommendations that come through that review, in accordance with the Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, we will take appropriate action.
Do you personally believe that Stuart Ayres has lied? And secondly, can I ask you if you're reneging on the deal about sports stadiums?
Well, in relation to the first one, I don't have evidence of that. And Mr Ayres has denied any wrongdoing in respect of this matter. That's important. He has denied any wrongdoing. And in relation to the process being at arm's length, well, that's obviously a matter that arises during the review. What was your second question?
Just in relation to sports stadiums, the verbal deal with Peter V'landys to upgrade those stadiums, we could lose the grand final over it.
Well, that would be incredibly disappointing if we lost the grand final. But the reality is I have to make decisions in the best interest of the people of New South Wales. And we have gone through a very difficult time as a state. I have over 1,000 people without a home based on the flooding that we've seen across New South Wales. The cost to the taxpayers in respect of that event is going to be significant. My job as Premier, when circumstances change, priorities change as well.
Mr Perrottet, this issue has been festering for more than 6 weeks now. Mr Ayres didn't need an independent review to tell him what he did in relation to John Barilara's appointment and his involvement, what involvement he had with the Department Secretary or Amy Brown. Couldn't this entire issue, the last 6 weeks of damage this has caused to your government been avoided if Stuart Ayres told you the truth?
Well, I need to say again very clearly, Mr. Ayres denies any wrongdoing. Denies any wrongdoing. The information that has come to light in the course of the review leads to the potential or raises questions of a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Now, on receipt of that, I made the decision. I have said I've been consistent, absolutely consistent, every step of the way in relation to the actions that I would take on receipt of that information. Mr. Ayres has said that he believes that the process, the recruitment process, was at arm's length in relation to, obviously, his engagement as well with the Department Secretary. That is information that has come to light in the review clearly demonstrates that the process was not at arm's length. Mr. Ayres denies that, and he has the right for this inquiry to take place. And once that inquiry has taken place, or review has taken place is engaged by the Department of Premier and Cabinet, I'll receive that information and act accordingly.
Are you worried about the rest of the review? This is just a draft excerpt that you saw. The rest of the review could be damning for you. Are you worried about that?
Well, I'm not going to preempt. I haven't seen the review. I'm not going to preempt.
I'm not. And it gives you a sense of what is to come.
I'm not going to preempt. I'm not going to preempt the outcome in respect of that review. I've said from the outset I wanted an independent review into this process, and once I received information from that review, I would act. I received information yesterday afternoon in relation to this matter, and have taken the appropriate action.
Why were you only briefed on the politically sensitive part of the report, though? Why were you only briefed on that?
Mr. Head, good question. Mr. Head believed that there was information that was material that pertained to Mr. Ayres that should be brought to my attention. So he provided a copy of that part of the report to the Department Secretary, who provided that to me yesterday, and briefed me in respect of it.
Are you frustrated that
confidence in Amy Brown? Do you still have confidence in Amy Brown, who's about to appear in front of?
Well, I haven't seen the entirety of the review, and obviously information will come through that. So I will need to make an assessment on that in relation to the entirety of the review that comes through. So the information I received yesterday, obviously has certain elements in relation to the Department Secretary, but only so far in respect of the engagement with Mr. Ayres.
Well, I was expecting to get by with this information as soon as possible because it was becoming so politically damaging.
No, I have always, obviously, it's been a political challenge in relation to the time that it's taken, but it's not for me to intervene in the process. Mr. Head's work needs to be completely independent from the executive. He has done that, and I've received that information yesterday from Mr. Head and taken the appropriate action.
Premier, you were obviously involved in the creation of the positions in the first place. Do you personally have any concerns that the Head review may raise issues with yourself?
No.
Do you believe Stuart Ayres? Do you still believe Stuart Ayres that he was not involved and he did not improperly influence this?
Well, first thing on that is I've conducted a review in relation to the engagement between. Conducted a review in relation to whether there's been a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Now, it's very clear from the excerpts that I have seen of the review that the process was not at arm's length. Mr. Ayres believes that disputes that, believes that he was always acting within his ministerial responsibilities in relation to that process. He denies any wrongdoing. He is entitled to have this review take place. And I think that, once again, is the only fair way forward. Mr. Ayres has been a very strong minister. It goes to the question earlier through. Mr. Ayres has been an incredibly strong minister in the New South Wales government. He served in this government not just as a member for Penrith, but as a senior minister in the New South Wales government for many years, particularly in terms of the work that he's done over the course of the pandemic, which I have witnessed in my previous capacity as Treasurer firsthand, has been second to none. He has served our state incredibly well. He has worked tirelessly for the betterment of the people of Penrith and the betterment of the people of New South Wales. And I very much appreciate his service. And that, you know, when issues arise and mistakes get made, ministers are accountable for that. And Minister Ayres has paid a very heavy price in circumstances as well where he denies any wrongdoing. But it was absolutely the right decision to be taken yesterday in respect of the information
But do
we
you
received.
take responsibility for this political crisis, because you didn't take decisive action at the start of this? In fact, you stood up and said John Barilaro would be a great trade minister. You didn't see it as a problem. Now, 6 weeks later, you've lost a minister over it, and your government is really in free fall because you didn't see this, that this was going to be a problem at the very beginning of this.
Well, let me say, firstly, at that point in time, there was no information before me in relation to problems with the recruitment process. They have come to light since that point in time. In relation to my actions and the decision-making that I have made, I've always been consistent. I've always said, yes, there are political challenges that happen along the course of government. But I'm not here to make decisions that are politically expedient. I am in this job to make decisions that I believe are right, based on information that I have received. In relation to other matters, with respect to the member for Kiama, when I had that information, I sought to remove the member for Kiama from the Parliament. In relation to Mr Sidoti, once information came to light from the ICAC, I made that decision in relation to a suspension motion for Mr Sidoti. In relation to Ms Patinos, when information came to light from the Department Secretary, I took action. And in relation to this matter, once information has come to light in respect of a process that I instigated, I've taken action.
So you take no responsibility?
I've taken responsibility on every one of those 4 occasions. I've taken responsibility every step of the way. I have a moral and ethical framework in which I make decisions in. And the moment I start making decisions because of media pressure or political pressure, I shouldn't be in this job. I make decisions on what I believe is right. And I will always do that, no matter what the political cost, to me or to my government.
Premier, how are you going to heal the party? It's pretty fractured after this.
The Liberal Party?
Yes.
There are always tough times in politics. This is a difficult time for us. But ultimately, we are a very good government. The Liberals and Nationals have turned around the state of New South Wales. We've turned around our state. We have laid foundations before the pandemic that has ensured a world-leading response to keep people in work, to keep businesses open, and to keep people healthy and safe. I'm very proud of our work as a government. We have done a lot, and we have a lot more to do. And the party, ultimately you are judged. You are judged based on your track record and where you are taking the state. I'm very proud of my team.
$300 million stadium for Penrith and none for other areas of Sydney is looking a little suspect now, isn't it?
Well, in relation to the engagement with the NRL in respect to this matter, they provide. We have been committed to a suburban stadium policy. I've made that very clear, and we've made decisions along the way, whether it's a suburban stadium in Penrith, or whether it's the Centres of Excellence that were funded in this year's budget.
Even Peter V'landys has raised questions about the fact that the one stadium that's being built.
Well, Mr V'landys and the NRL have provided a sequencing to the New South Wales government in relation to those programs. We have made commitments in relation to those stadiums. In respect of Penrith, it has always been my view, in terms of our 3 cities that we have in the eastern city, the central city, and the Aerotropolis. We have 3 great cities and 3 great sporting infrastructure associated with that. We have that with Allianz, we have that with Bankwest, and we have that with Penrith. Now, ultimately, though, when we've put close to $2 billion $2 billion. There's no other state that has put as much investment in relation to sporting infrastructure than the New South Wales government. No other state. Whether that's in sporting infrastructure, whether that's in stadia, whether that's in centres of excellence, or whether that is in relation to grassroots community sport. And I'm very proud of that track record. But when circumstances change, priorities change too. And ultimately, I'm not accountable to Peter V'landys. I'm accountable to the people of New South Wales. They are my priority, and I will always act in the interest of the people of our state.
So it's not pork barrelling when Penrith is getting it, a marginal seat, and Cronulla and Manly, which are safe Liberal seats, they're not getting it.
Well, the decision we had made decisions in a direction of sporting infrastructure and suburban grounds. In the most recent budget, we put funding for centres of excellence in St George, in Wollongong, in Canterbury, and in one other, and in Kellyville, and in Parramatta. So that has never been in the decision-making process that matter. What has been in my decision-making process, completely supported by the New South Wales Cabinet, that when the circumstances change, when we're given information in relation to matters that need to be dealt with, then the priorities change too. And I believe that's what the people of New South Wales expect from me as their leader. And I have a situation, as I've said, where over 1,000 people are without homes following the most recent flooding event. They are my priority. Now, there's no doubt that this decision is going to be unpopular in some quarters. I accept that. But I'm not here to make decisions that are popular. I'm here to make decisions that are right. It is the right thing to do in the circumstances we find ourselves in, for me to invest money where it's going to make a real difference to people across our state. That's what I'm doing.
Premier, you said that as soon as you got the head report, you would release it.
Yep.
Will you be releasing these drafts,
No.
these findings? Why not?
Because it's draft. Once I receive the final report, I will make it public as soon as possible.
What
was that?
When would that be?
Shortly.
Do you see a pathway back to the ministry for Stuart Ayres if he is cleared of any subsequent, any wrongdoing in any subsequent investigation?
Well, I haven't turned my mind to that. Obviously, I'm putting a review in place. If Mr. Ayres is cleared by that review, he'll be in the party room. He'll be obviously alongside colleagues in the party room and has the same rights as every member of the Liberals and the Nationals Party in the parliamentary party room.
What are you going to do with the cabinet? You know, you've lost two. Are you going to do a reshuffle? When are we going to see a new deputy leader? What's going to happen?
So the deputy leader should be elected in the party room on Tuesday.
Okay. Just in terms of then replacing, are you going to replace Eleni Patinos? I know Victor Dominelli.
I haven't made a decision in relation to that. My intention is to reallocate portfolios shortly in relation to Minister Ayres' roles.
Will there be like a wider reshuffle though?
I haven't made a decision. Thanks.
Thank you.
Heart attack running down.